Let me begin by thanking Lakeland Vision and Lakeland Now and the AGB, and what a wonderful space to talk about art. I honestly thought we were going to be in the boring old auditorium, but we're not. So this is really fantastic, and we'll get you out of here in a timely manner. But be aware that, or be warned, I could talk about art all day, all night. But we do have a script that I will sort of follow. But it's a wonderful opportunity to have these discussions, and I'm grateful to be able to moderate this and to share this stage with some individuals who have keen insight in their own respective areas. And so we'll touch on some of those things, and then we'll end tonight with some question and answers, or questions. We may or may not provide answers, but we will have some questions from the audience and move on from there. So. Again, my name is Daryl Ward. Quick background. I am the Executive Director of the Polk Arts and Cultural Alliance. I previously was the principal at Harrison School for the Arts, and then I was the assistant principal. I've had a lot of titles. I've been the president of the board for a nonprofit, et cetera, but I jokingly tell everybody, at heart, I am a recovering English teacher. That is really what I am. So I'm honored to be here this evening. I'm going to do a quick bios. I know the bios are in the programs, but quick intros. I'm going to start on this side. We have Tiffany Van Wieren. Tiffany, yeah, you can applaud. Or not. I don't want to put pressure on people. But Tiffany runs Watson Clinic's Arts and Health program. She's really working to expand that. Just recently rolled out the Polk Arts and Health Collaborative. So you may have seen some social media posts about that, so we're excited about that. So we want to welcome Tiffany. My good friend Ashley Miller. Ashley is the executive director of the Lakeland Symphony Orchestra. So we're excited to have her here to talk about the orchestra. On this side, we have Ashley Gibson Barnett. You may have heard that name before. Since we're in this particular building with it. But here's some things you don't know about Ashley that I do. One, some of you may know this, but very few, and that she's an accomplished photographer and award-winning photographer in her own right. And then even fewer of you know that she, as we're speaking, is now Dr. Ashley Gibson Barnett. So congratulations, Dr. Barnett. As a doctor myself, that ain't easy, folks. So congratulations. And then Gillian Fazio, so excited that Gillian's with us. Gillian is a gifted muralist. You cannot throw a stick without seeing one of her murals in this town, right? And we're grateful to have her here with us. And I love the fact that Gillian is homegrown. She grew up here in our community and went to school here in the public school system and has come back and contributed to our arts and culture and our community in such a positive way. So welcome, Gillian. All right, so we're going to get started with I want to start with a softball kind of question, a little positive thing. So I'm going to toss this question out. I'll answer it first so you can think. What is one thing, and I have to give a little preface. My role as the executive director of the Polk Arts and Cultural Alliance kind of forces me to think beyond Lakeland. That's my job. And I'm going to do my best, though, while we're in here this evening to kind of concentrate on Lakeland-specific things. But if I slip here or there, please forgive me, because that my mindset is not just making sure Lakeland has art, but making sure Frostproof does too. So just be aware of that. So what is one thing that you think the arts and cultural community, the arts and cultural sector of Lakeland does or is doing well? Okay, that's the first question. I'm going to answer it and give you guys some time to think. I really think that in our Lakeland demographic, geographic area, that the city of Lakeland as a municipality does a fantastic job in promoting arts and culture. Whether it's their outdoor sculpture competition, whether it's their interactive art trail, whether it's supporting a mural at the RP Funding Center, Pam Page, Bob Donahue, those folks in that department just do a fantastic job. They're very progressive. And again, with my countywide perspective, not all municipalities have that kind. Now, they don't have those kind of resources, but they also don't have that kind of perspective. So the city of Lakeland won our Arts and Cultural Organization of the Year award last year at our annual gala, and they really deserve it. That's something that the city of Lakeland, that they really do well. So that's that answer. All right, I'm going to go to you, Ashley.
Oh, great. I'm glad you didn't steal my answer, Daryl.
Yeah, that was a danger.
I think that, the thriving arts community here in the city of Lakeland is bound together by collaboration and partnerships. And we see that through, I mean, just sitting with these women here on this panel and with Daryl, and the way that we all collaborate, not only in meshing our efforts together and seeing where they overlap and where they don't, but also innovating new ideas, working with Tiffany and some of the things that she'll share with you that she's working on are really important to grow this community's arts and culture even further. So I think we're really great collaborators, and we have a lot to be proud of.
Tiffany.
Let's try that again. Okay, so I would say opportunities for engagement at every level, right? So we have things like the cookie concert. I promise we're not just going to be up here complimenting each other all day, but things like the cookie concert that just happened, or the fact that the AGB is free to come and look at this amazing art. Things like that, from there all the way up to beautiful concerts and beautiful arts engagements that you pay tickets for, and the RP Funding Center bringing things in. There are a wide variety of opportunities, even Mayfair. I mean, just, you could go on, and we, I think, are unique in that, and we are very fortunate, I think, in this area to have so many opportunities for engagement. Yeah,
last year I had the opportunity to work with someone from over in the Tampa Bay area, one of the news channels, and that we were doing something actually in Winter Haven, but he was just blown away by what was going on, and the line that I gave him is, again, countywide perspective, is don't sleep on Polk County, right? There's a lot of amazing things happening here, and our job is to make sure that they know that. We have just wonderful assets here in our community. Ashley.
Yeah, sort of to piggyback, I think diversity and accessibility, I think that we often take for granted the diversity of these types of programs that we have. The fact that you can go to the Lakeland Symphony Cookie Concert and come to a Smithsonian affiliate art museum, and the fact that so many of these programs or activities are free to the public. I think that that's really particularly a really interesting point. I think it's something that's important. One of my favorite facts about Lakeland is that we're one of the most philanthropic cities in the United States per capita, and I think that speaks volumes to that, because those those activities or those resources wouldn't be available if it wasn't for the generosity of people, grants, and all these sorts of things. So I'm very, very thankful for the diversity and accessibility for everyone.
Great point. Gillian.
I was going to say, I think that it's wonderful the way that the Lakeland community has this excitability over arts. So it really embraces, and not only the public, but the local news sources for my genre of art specifically are so welcoming with open arms and supportive of things that I personally, in my experience, have created. So just the local support and engagement with the things as a local artist that I create, it feels very positive, and it makes it feel like I, as a just human in this community, am making a difference and making everybody feel a little bit more happy on their walk to work or walk around town. But I think the excitability and the want for more art is the hunger for art in Lakeland it's good.
Super, thank you. So let's kind of take that question and you use it to branch off of that and talk a little bit about if those are the things that are going well, and what are perhaps some barriers? What are some obstacles that maybe in your respective roles you see for artists or arts and cultural organizations? So what about you, Ashley?
Well, funding.
Yeah. And by the way, the panel, you only get to say funding once.
Oh, fine. All right.
So if you got your bingo cards out there, funding has been checked.
I think the barriers that we're seeing, and I'm born and raised here, Lakeland native, so I think I take for granted that not everybody knows that we have a symphony. Not everybody knows that we have a free art museum. And so as much as we all know it and we live it, there's beyond Lakeland, like you said, Daryl, there's such an opportunity for more accessibility and for us to get in front of more people. And that is a barrier, even just the size of the county is a barrier for us as we grow our audience beyond Lakeland. So one of the things that we're seeing is the idea of taking art to people and bringing it to them in their space so that they can be introduced to that and turn into arts lovers like all of you.
That's a really good point because one of my personal and professional charges that I say all the time is that your access to arts and cultural experiences should not be dictated by your zip code, but it is. So bringing the art to the people here at PACA, we're working on a program called Art in Public Spaces, where we're trying to get art in spaces, not in a public space sense like public art, in a garden, so to speak, which is wonderful. But we want to put art in places where people don't expect to see art. You're standing in line in the tag agency and there's beautiful art, or a quartet bursts out into song. Whatever it is, but that's art in public spaces, and we're working on some programs to do that because I think you're exactly right, Ashley, is bringing that to people because there are barriers, there are access barriers to people. There's knowledge barriers, right, that these exist, and then there's access barriers. All right, Tiffany?
So kind of piggybacking on what you're saying, I think one of the difficult challenges that we experience, and I think everybody on this stage can probably attest to this as well as many of the people in this room, is you see a lot of the same people come to the same things, right? And I think the way that we think about arts, and I'm going to say this probably way too much tonight, as extra, is really challenging. It makes it so that adults, particularly, in my work, we have at the Cancer Center, we have a studio space for patients as they're waiting. And one of the main constraints we hear are, oh, I'm not artsy, I'm not, because as adults, we just have this idea that art is about perfection, and it's not. Arts is about connection. And so I think that spreading the message, and I think if we can, as a community, bring that message of it's all right to play, it's all right to create, and in fact, it's good for you, it's good for your health, and it's good for our community. So I think engaging people who don't always come to these kinds of things and reaching those, I think, is probably something we can do more of.
Yep. So here's your free tip. Well, I guess everything was free tonight. You didn't have to pay to get in here. So here's your sort of free thing. If you want to experience what Tiffany's talking, the New York Times does this really cool thing. You can subscribe, it's free, and they call it 10 Minutes with Art. And they send you an email, and in the email you click on the link, and they ask you to stare at this piece of art, whatever it is, for 10 minutes. Nothing else. You just look at that piece of art for 10 minutes. And to Tiffany's point, the way you will start to engage with that art after staring at it for 10 minutes, you probably wouldn't have thought that, and I'm not talking about you're going to suddenly become out of there as an art scholar. That's really not its purpose. But the understanding of how art just engages your whole being, from your mind even to your physical being, it's really a cool thing to do. So you can look that up in the New York Times.
If I can just real quick, if you're interested in that and how it engages your brain, I would highly recommend Your Brain on Art by Susan Magsamen and Ivy Ross. It's out of Johns Hopkins. Wonderful material to engage yourself and to just educate yourself on how the arts impact your physiology.
Yeah, super, thank you. All right, Gillian, so what do you think is kind of especially as an artist, what do you see as some barriers?
Okay, so I am very blessed in the way that this is my full-time job, but I do know a significant portion of our local makers and artists and creatives that they're not able to sustain their full-time income based off of creative processes and sustain basically paying all their bills and stuff with that. So I want to make sure that I acknowledge that and that I'm lucky in this way, but also noticing that we do have events like Mayfair and we do have art crawl and things, but I think we don't really have a lot of gallery spaces besides this lovely establishment to showcase local makers' work, and that could be something that in the future Lakeland could grow to kind of showcase and celebrate our local artists on a more consistent base than singular shows every so often.
You're talking about a physical space where artists can show their work, local artists can show their work. So good, great point. Ashley?
Yeah, I wouldn't consider it particularly a barrier, but something I would love to see grow is the interaction with youth in art. I think we have a lot of great annual programs. There's a lot of great organizations who have outreach and activities for our youth. But I think it really starts at a very young age. You know, I'm very proud that 5,000 fourth graders visit the AGB every single year. I'd love to see that expanded. I'd love for children to understand the impact of art and how they can engage in art in other ways in their life other than just observing. You know, knowing that you could have a piece of art in your home, you could create a piece of art, you could go view a piece of art. I think that art touches our lives in so many ways, and trying to introduce that concept to children at such a young age and regularly, I think is very important. So I would love to extend the access and the availability of these types of programs all year long for children of all ages.
Thank you. And again, to her point, the AGB does a wonderful job of welcoming in students, not only visiting the museum, but there's several different exhibits that through the Polk County school system that students are able to have here. I mean, and to have your work from elementary all the way up to high school, to have your work exhibited in a Smithsonian affiliate museum, that's just an amazing thing. And so that's a true blessing that our community have. And I would echo, I think what Ashley and Tiffany were saying, sometimes we take that for granted. We don't realize that. And we'll talk a lot about that tonight, not in a sense of shirking any responsibility we have for our community to better our arts and cultural experiences and opportunities, but I am a firm believer that there's power in perspective. And really understanding what's happening around us helps us formulate how we can be better. And because I think sometimes we think things, we hear things, whether it's social media, whatever it is, that really they're not accurate. And so that's really important to make sure that we're understanding what we do have so that we can work expanding that. And we'll talk a little bit about, I'm sure, as we go on this evening. So I think those were nice questions. We all did a nice job on that. Okay, now for now let me just drop a little nuclear bomb in this, okay? So federal, state, local funding for arts, right? It's less than, some of you may or may not know this, but it's less than 0.1% of a budget. Historically, by the way, historically, not Republican, not Democrat, historically. That's what it is. It always has been that. Yet, we feel like the arts in some cases are under attack from federal, state, local. So I guess the question we're going to talk a little bit about, and we cheated because we had these questions ahead of time. Because I wouldn't throw this on anybody. But this is I'm interested in hearing the responses to this question. So it's this: does the government have any responsibility to fund the arts? And before everybody gets up on their high horse and says, yes, does the government then have a right to say what art is funded?
I'll go first.
Good, because I don't want to go first.
I will go first. No. First, I would say yes, absolutely, because the arts are infrastructure. They are
Explain.
I shall. They are intricately involved in the way that we work, play, live, and create healthy communities. They touch every single part of a community.
So you don't see them as a luxury.
They are not a luxury, not at all. They increase. You can clap for that. That's a wonderful thing. They increase neighborhood safety. They increase economic viability. And if you haven't had a chance to go to Americans for the Arts, they have a wonderful, just lovely, social impact explorer that is a wonderful tool to use, and it has great data with resources and the sources to back it up for this research that actually shows impacts like 20% property increase for communities that have a cultural organization like Polk Arts and Cultural Alliance, or 86, it might be 87, don't quote me, percent increase in civic engagement for those who participate in the arts. And if you care about the future, then you care about education, which means you care about arts education, because arts and education decreases dropout rates by 5 times. It increases the likelihood that they'll graduate from college by 2 times. And as far as the hard part of the question, right, does the government have a say in how the art is produced or what art is produced? I think it's a very, very difficult line to follow, but I do believe we have to have accountability. That's very important because you want it to be of benefit, not just for the artist, not just for the organization, but for the community as well. But we have processes for this, right? We have grant application processes, we have award, application processes, and a lot of times you have to prove it so much that it's cumbersome, right? And not everybody can have a grant writer on staff, but we do that in that desire to make sure that we have that accountability. Where we have to be careful is censorship, because censorship strips away, and the arts. It can strip away one of the things that makes the arts great, which is the arts helps us to reflect, and it helps us to be challenged. And it's important for us to be challenged. It's important for us to think critically. It's important for us to see outside of ourselves, and censorship strips those things away. So I think, yes, we have to have accountability, but we have to be also on guard as a society from censorship.
So, wonderful answer.
Oh, I have one more thing, sorry. No,
Getting away from me already.
I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
No, wonderful answer. But so if I can distill that, your take on it, Tiffany, is that to you, arts and cultural funding is really no different than funding for roads and funding for public safety, et cetera.
Absolutely. Listen, it should be like streets and streetlights.
Okay.
They both get us to where we want to go.
Okay.
I would love
Go
to
ahead.
jump in.
Go ahead. Yeah, go.
So I have a perspective that I never thought I would have the opportunity to have in life on the other side of seeing how funding happens. One of the greatest privileges that I've been able to have to serve the state of Florida is this past year, Governor DeSantis appointed me to the Council of Arts and Culture. And so these grants that you're speaking of and the funding requests, I have read every single one in the state of Florida. I have had to grade them, vote. It's all, and I have to say, anyone, please, because of the Florida Sunshine Law, everything is public record. All of our meetings and everything is live streamed. You can see it, view it. I encourage you to, because to be aware and to know what's going on makes you a better advocate in your community. So please, 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 log on, view it, see it, do it, be a part, be involved of it. There's also an open question part at the end of it. So, I mean, please, active engagement is really, really important. But it's also given me a fresh perspective because I was the first person, I will tell this about myself, I'm a bleeding heart. I'm like, give us all the money for all the arts. Like, we need to fund everything. But having to see on the other side of you cannot fund everything. You don't want to say everything doesn't merit funding, but what I do have to say, there's been things that have turned those perspectives for me. For instance, you look at the organizations of the people, like how complete is this application? You mentioned it's very cumbersome. It is not for the faint of heart. I would not want it to be my job to have to write this application, but it's a lot of work. But you can tell the people who actually follow through, do the work, and apply what they need to do. Also, the couple things I think of recently I can speak to this last year that has been really transformative of the conversation or how votes have had is the impact that you're going to have in your community. Now, it is kind of more like a per capita. So it's, for instance, it's not fair to say, how many people are you serving at the AGB versus the Strauss Center? We will never win that contest. But per capita, how are you serving the Lakeland community versus how is the Strauss Center serving the Tampa community, right? So it is a comparative piece and what is the project and what it is. Again, how complete their application is. But also I think matching funding is huge. And I think to me, when I was voting, what I took really to heart was matching funding or funding at all. There's many applications that came through that the only funding that had been asked or raised was only that particular
So
application.
the organization was dependent on the grant.
Correct. And to me, it's not just could you make this thing exist, it's how are you going to sustain this? Is there interest? What impact does that then have for the community? I don't think throwing money at a problem necessarily solves it. Or to create something doesn't mean that it's going to drive the want or the need to have that in the community. So I think that's very important to see how is the community being receptive to this as well. So I know that's kind of a little bit of a tangent, but I've had a new perspective I never thought I would be able to have in life going through it on the other side. It's made me a little bit more understanding, but at the same time, I'm still like, give everyone all the money all the time. We need the arts. And, I try to do as much as I can, but it has given me a fresh perspective.
Sure. Gillian.
So these are like fantastic answers so far. So, but I always have, my own perspective as an artist that's partnered with like local government agencies like the CRA that have given me the opportunity when I've applied for it. I've applied for like 1 zillion murals and public art things, and it is cumbersome on a small scale. It's obviously not a gigantic, like, huge grant for an organization, but I think that obviously we need to, I'm sorry. So I think that intent is important on like the applicant's application. So whenever you're applying for this, like censorship-wise, we don't really want to censor, but I think that the intent of the artist is to like convey their perspective. So maybe like prioritizing when you're hopefully like providing all of this funding for like murals or public art or advocating for arts in a community, that like prioritizing diversity and like not limiting in a visual sense, like what the imagery looks like, as long as the intent is a positive impact on the community.
Good answer, and I would thank you for that. And I would jump in and let you answer, Ashley. I think what you said, Ashley, about perspective is really important. I mentioned that earlier too. For example, when I was principal at Harrison, and we were reviewing annually what performances we were going to do, I would have conversations with the teachers at the time. And we understand what Gillian was saying is understanding your community is really key. And I knew there were performances that Miami could do that Polk County could not. And that's not a slight or against anything. It's just the community, the culture, the mores, everything is different. And I think understanding that as an artist, to your point, when you're applying for grants and those sort of things and making a public impact, what the community, and that changes, by the way. That changes, by the way. There were things that, truthfully, there were performances that we couldn't do when I started at Harrison, and then 15 years later, that would have been easily accepted by the community. And that just happens. Again, I'm not saying that's good or bad. That's just kind of a factual thing as things shift. And I think that's really important to remember as well. I'm trying my best not to answer this question, so I'm gonna let Ashley do it.
You're doing a great job. I echo what Tiffany's remarks about art being part of our infrastructure, being part of our economy, being part of our health, being part of our community. It is an absolute necessity, just like the roads that we're driving on. And I think those who are passionate about the arts would all agree with that. Ashley really brought up a great point about looking at sustainability. I think folks in our positions, and especially working among artists and people who are passionate about art, we have a lot of ideas that come our way. You should do this, we should do that, let's do this, let's do that. And obviously there's a lot of planning that goes into pulling things off. But one of the items that we look at is sustainability. Sounds like a great idea this year, but what does it look like 10 years down the road? And so when funding is up in the air, those are things that we really have to drill down on and ask ourselves those questions. I will completely agree that is one of the most difficult grant applications I've ever written. But it's diligent in the way that it is asking you the questions so that it can hold organizations accountable. The question about whether or not the government has business censoring the arts.
That wasn't the question.
Oh, does it?
No, it is a censor. It is should they have a say in the type of art that is produced. That's censorship?
Okay.
Interesting.
Semantics.
Very interesting.
I think, regardless of either of those questions, I think art is inherently the opposite of censorship. Art takes your soul and shows it back to you. It's created those visions, those human, it's created out of Gillian and our, you know, our 48 musicians that sit on stage. It is inherently not meant to be that. And I believe it's our job to protect that.
Great answer. Super answer.
Can I add?
All right, next question.
Wait, can I add? Because
Yeah, add away.
So I think when it comes to like dictating what is visually represented in my form of art, I think that if you are allowing a wide variety of artists to represent themselves on your city, like in your city space, you're inherently going to create a sense of like pride, and automatically you're going to have like diversity. You're going to have people feel included in their own community. You're going to have a sense of pride. And if they all look like my art, I don't want that. I want there to be as many different kinds of art and as many different backgrounds of artists represented, so that when you think of Lakeland, you think of like the wide variety of artists and things represented when you walk around and see the artwork. So.
Super. Great, absolutely. All right. I'm going to not answer the question and move on to the next question. You want me to answer the question? So ideally, I think every government in the entire universe should support art. And I mean that. Practically, I hate it. And I hate it because of the things we've been talking about. Because of how it turns things political and it turns things to censorship, and it does that. And to take the other side of it, a side of it, I'm not going to say the other side of it, I do think if we're talking about taxpayer dollars, if we're talking about private dollars, hey, if you got them, spend them. But we're talking about taxpayer dollars, my taxpayer dollars, your taxpayer dollars. There better be stewardship involved in that. And that is the government's responsibility. I don't care what political party it is their responsibility to be stewards of the taxpayer dollars. And I have to recognize that. And that's why I said ideally, I think the government should support art, because it's an important part of what we said. I hate it from a practical standpoint, because then it does become political. Then it does end up creating censorship issues. Then it does end up creating questionable.
But there's also real risk. You have coercion, you have hate speech, you have all sorts of things that could fall under this umbrella under the guise of art, right? So I think it's time, place, manner, where this is being displayed, who is your audience. So I mean, I think you bring up a very valid point.
Yeah, because if it was all privately funded, right, do what you want. And I will say one kind of thing, and then we'll move on, because in my role as the executive director of PACA, I have a lot of people, like Ashley mentioned, people come to us with ideas all the time, and I'm a huge supporter of arts, and I really, really have amped up how PACA supports local artists. If you talk to some of them, I think they'll agree with me there. But that being said, I will look at a local artist. When I first took this job, I had a local artist come to me and say, I want to start a professional theater in Lakeland. And I said, really? And I said, okay, because we have theaters in Lakeland, not professional. We actually have a couple professionals, but we have the community theater. I said, what do you want to do? And they said, I want to create art by marginalized people and for marginalized people. I said, that's a fantastic idea. Will anybody come see that? And I wasn't trying to be mean. There's an ROI on it if you're talking about sustainability, and then we get into the funding issue. Does your ticket sales merit supporting that? And by the way, I don't know really, I tried to think about this today when I was sitting around brainstorming about this event this evening. I'm not sure, and you can chime in here, I'm not sure I know of any arts and culture organization where ticket sales supports the organization.
Absolutely accurate.
Right? I don't.
Yes.
So there's always a degree, and I hesitate to use this term. Carrie Falwell smacks me up in the head every time I do it. But I hesitate to use the term subsidized. But maybe we'll use a more euphemistic term. Supported. Right? These organizations have to be supported through some other manner, and it may be grant funding, it may be private funding. But ticket sales alone, they're just not. I would even argue probably something as large as the Straz probably can't do that on ticket sales alone.
They probably don't even break even.
Yeah, in that regard. So I share that to say, let's get the obvious out there, that if we believe in arts and culture and we want it for our community, there does have to be a way to support that outside of saying, well, can you support yourself? That's just, I think time immemorial, that's not been something that happens. That doesn't mean it's less valuable or that we shouldn't do it, but then it kicks us to that other side about how we prioritize, because Ashley's point's valid. Last thing I'll say, and that's the second to last time I've said that, I do think, and Gillian made a comment earlier about CRAs, I do think it's really important, again, to have as nuanced a perspective as you can have when you're understanding, or I guess the nice way to say it, critiquing government spending. And the nuance I mean about that is there's a difference between federal funding and state funding and local funding. And I am here to tell you that Polk County, from my perspective, the Board of County Commission does a really nice job at funding arts and cultural opportunities. They literally pay for the Polk History Center. That's a Board of County Commissioners thing. That comes out of their budget. They don't have to do that, but they do because they believe it's important. They support the Polk Arts and Cultural Alliance, which allows, we have a line item in their budget, which allows us to go out and help local artists. Now, I've had this conversation with some people on my board who are a little more militant, and they want to kind of just go after the jugular there. And my point is I'm not suggesting we can't have a discussion about how any government agency could do more or could do better. We can do that. But I really think it's important to acknowledge what is happening, right? And as Ashley said earlier, when DeSantis vetoed the things last year, we had philanthropists that stepped up in our community who didn't have to do that, right? Our local government, our county government supports that. I said earlier, the city of Lakeland puts a ton of money into arts and cultural opportunities. So I just want to make sure we're really careful about acknowledging what does happen, because it's really easy to critique what doesn't in that regard. So, all right, now I'm going to ask some specific questions of each of you. I'll start with Tiffany. Give the audience in your role, what's a powerful example of how arts can improve community well-being? Not a lame-o example, a powerful example. I didn't write that question.
Example ready. Man. So I'm going to give something that kind of impacted us here last year locally, and then kind of give a broader perspective. So last year, One Nation, One Project had a sub-project called Arts for Everybody. And nationwide, on July 27th, they had a call to action to declare July 27th as Arts and Health Day. So cities all over America did this, including here. And it allowed us, a little side note, for us, it allowed us to begin to educate around arts and health. And it allowed us to kind of have this jumping off point, this sort of soft launch of Polk Arts and Health Collaborative, which this year we're actually having a whole week of arts and health engagements in November that's citywide. We have different locations all over for that. But in 18 cities, they had huge citywide festivals as part of this. That was all about engaging the public in arts and health education and participatory engagements as well. And impacts are still being felt now, which is amazing. There's still research that's being processed from this wonderful, I guess, 18 cities that they had. They're actually going around talking about it. And a lot of these cities have been able to grow neuroarts ecosystems where they've been able to bring in social prescribing. If you've never heard of social prescribing, it's okay because it's fairly new to the United States. This is the idea that you go to your doctor and just like you would get your thyroid medication filled, you get an arts prescription or a social prescription or a neuroarts prescription.
I can get a prescription for the symphony?
Absolutely. So imagine you're a 67-year-old man, you suffer from chronic pain, and
yes. Keep going.
I wasn't looking at your file when I said that. So, and you suffer from chronic pain, you're doing all the things that you're supposed to do, right? You take your pain medication, you make sure you're moving, your doctor has you on an antidepressant, you're even seeing a therapist, and you're like, I'm just still really struggling. And so your doctor goes, I've got a prescription for that. And they give you an arts prescription. And the great thing is, guess what? Your insurance might even cover it. And you're like, Okay, so you get connected with the link worker. The link worker finds out, you played oboe in college? That's amazing. We have an orchestra right here, the Lakeland Symphony Orchestra. I'm gonna hook you up, help remove some of those barriers for you to go. The cost is covered, and I want you to go ahead and go. We're gonna call you beforehand to let you know that tonight's the orchestra concert. We're gonna call you afterwards. We're probably gonna collect some data, and in 6 months, if it's working for you, guess what? We're gonna go ahead and refill that prescription. So this is a wonderful thing for a couple of different reasons. First of all, the arts, medication is a brilliant invention. I mean, just like the science behind medications that we need is vital to our health. But a lot of times they work on 1 or 2 neuroreceptors, right? The arts works on multiple neuroreceptors all at once. It engages the whole part of us. And so it's able to do things for our physiology and our mental health that medications can't always touch. And especially if you do those things together, I mean, how powerful is that? There are some of the preliminary research, one of the organizations in New York that has an arts prescribing program, they saw a 70% reduction in ER visits. 70. So this is why there are organizations that are helping insurance companies create coding now for these type of prescribing programs. And I'm gonna go on just a little bit further if you don't mind.
Like I have a say-so in it.
It's one of the reasons that the Watson Clinton Foundation's Arts and Medicine program really wanted to do the Polk Arts and Health Collaborative. And we've been joined by Polk Arts and Cultural Alliance, the LSO, Orlando Health, LVIM, Lakeland. I mean, we have wonderful partners that are part of this. And it's the website, just so you know, is Polk Arts and Health, shameless plug, polkartsandhealth.org. And the whole purpose of this is to build a neuro arts ecosystem so that we can bring this type of thing here locally. And to help us to engage and remember that arts is about health. It's as important as you're making sure you eat your Wheaties and get enough sleep. I mean, it's that vital. So I think this is just one example of how powerful it is when we engage in arts and health and reduce silos for these fields.
Great answer, yeah. Yep, I'm going to take my art
Was
pill
that a
tomorrow,
lame
yeah.
one? Was that a lame answer?
No, that was not a lame-o answer.
Okay.
That was pretty good. I've heard your speech before, so I knew that.
Oh, yeah.
I knew
You
that
knew
was
it was
coming,
coming.
but it's powerful. And when I was principal at Harrison, I was somewhat known for saying art makes you smart, and apparently it also, makes your heart better too.
It does make your heart
that's
better,
good
yeah.
stuff. All right, let's shift gears a little bit, but it is sort of related. So, Gillian, what do you wish more people knew about? I don't want to say the struggles, because there have to be struggles, but the life of a working artist, because that probably, my guess, I'm sure we have some artists in the crowd, but for most of us that aren't artists, they probably attach some kind of romantic notion to it, which is not a good idea. But that's probably what I think what non-artists kind of do. So go ahead and smash that.
Okay. Well, there's definitely a number of artists in the audience. I thank you guys for coming. So I wanted to make sure that I touch on the fact that earlier you mentioned I do have a lot of murals that you see the finished product when you go around Lakeland, but what you don't know or maybe you don't see is the like all of the work that goes in that's basically invisible before the end product. You come upon a beautiful orange and butterfly mural. So one thing that is like very key to like me personally having success in an art field is like as much tenacity and like resilience as like the same amount of those as there is talent. So there's the same amount of work, the same amount of like invisible failures to you guys. You might not see like the experimentation or the behind the scenes marketing and networking and like trial and error that I go through or any artist goes through for the finished work to be a part of the community or to be presented to you. But definitely like the amount of resilience that is behind each piece of work. And that probably goes for the orchestra and it goes for everything is the resilience.
Right,
Yeah.
resilient, and the danger in thinking that the product just kind of happens without recognizing the process, right?
Yes. Well, we live in a very instant
Yes.
time.
So I'm curious, what's a rough estimate then? Because I've seen your murals; they're fantastic, and they're large, right? You're not doing them on a postcard, right? So what's the general time frame that it takes you, say, from start to finish with a mural?
Including the grant writing process for each of those and the planning process for each of those.
Right. So my ideal timeline is when people are like, oh, sometime in 2025. I'm like, mwah, perfect. So, or if they're like next year, I'm like, oh, amazing. So, but then you have people who are so hopeful and they're like, we need this in 30 days. And I'm like, haha, okay. Yeah, so basically the ideal timeline is the longer out the better, so that I can make sure that I do my due diligence on going back and forth and doing contracts and doing things that are not that fun, but necessary to protect the client and myself, and then design phases where you go through edits and you go through conversations about, okay, what is the function of the mural? How do we want people to interact with it? So that can take anywhere from a month to a couple months, and it just depends. And then you have every so often like the cherry pick client that's like, perfect, print it, we love it. So that happens, but I do want to mention that like none of it is really possible without like the support from the community that I have felt personally. Like we were talking about the AGB like supports young local artists, and like in school I got to share my work when I was in 6th grade. My art was in the gallery downstairs, so that's very fun, and to be celebrated as an artist. So when you're a local artist, to be, whether it's community engagement digitally like through social media, or hiring a local artist to create your sign or create your mural or whatever that might be, like that's very important for like supporting the local arts. If you don't know how to support the local arts, like that's a great way to do it.
Daryl, can you give your spiel about, buying art?
Oh, yeah. No.
He has to do it everywhere he goes. 'cause
Yeah,
it's
I do
important.
that. I tell people, stop buying art at Walmart. Right? If you need art, and we do need art, and if you need it from a decorative sense, and many businesses do, you need to support local artists. And I mean, I know Gillian does large scales, but I assure you she'll paint a door if you want that for you, right? I mean, local artists, they're small business people, they're entrepreneurs. And we need to support them as well. And so when I'd say that frequently, and that's sort of what I mean. And if you don't know, I actually had someone say, how do you get in touch with art? Let me just reach out, I'll connect you. I had someone recently reach out and said, hey, we're redesigning an office space, I need a muralist. And I said, no offense, Gillian, I can connect you with somebody. He wanted a different kind of vibe. And I was able to connect him with that person. And that's, again, local artists, entrepreneur, so keep that in mind. All right, let's shift gears a little bit to Ashley. So, Symphony Orchestra. I've been hearing for decades, because I'm old, as Tiffany pointed out, that classical music is on the demise, right? And that symphony attendance, I think they're probably talking whether it's globally or nationally, whether it's declining, et cetera, et cetera. And what I've been reading, the cure for that tends to focus on how symphonies or classical music organizations are engaging younger people. So I'm going to ask you this question. Tell us how the LSO has to deal with that as well, right? How the LSO, what are you all doing to engage younger audiences to hopefully not only educate them about classical music, but to inspire them? And Gillian had a great testimony about the fact that her work was in this museum was inspirational to her. So hearing and being a part of a symphony is inspirational to people. What are some plans and things that you guys are working on?
Thanks, Daryl. I'm really, really proud of our educational efforts and the way that we prioritize sharing the opportunity for live symphonic music with children free of charge. Our symphony every student ticket to our symphony series is free with a student ID, and we are grateful to be able to do that through private donations. We also, I'm very proud of our annual cookie concert. We've referenced that a little bit tonight. And we just did that. It's a spring tradition here in Lakeland. I'm 42 years old, and I spent many years growing up going to the cookie concert at the Symphony Orchestra. So that is a core memory for a lot of young people who are now adults some of whom are playing professionally in our orchestra now, who were inspired by their first experience at the Cookie Concert. The Cookie Concert is sponsored by Publix Supermarket Charities. It's called the Cookie Concert because at the end you get a Publix cookie.
Now, grown-ups can come to that too.
Grown-ups can come too. I did hand some cookies out to some grown-ups. I think Leslie did as well. But one of the really fun things about the Cookie Concert is what happens in the lobby the hour before the concert. If you walk into the doors of the lobby of Branscombe an hour before the Cookie Concert, you will be faced with a wall of sound. And that is because there are probably 200 children in the lobby matched up with our professional musicians who are actually trying to make a sound on the trombone, or who are actually holding a student violin and running the bow across. Some of my favorite photos that have been captured throughout this season are the photos of our professional musicians interacting with these small children. And for them to come out of that and say, I remember when I first touched a cello at the instrument petting zoo, and now I'm taking my cello to college with me. Those formative years with children are key to engaging them in arts, and we've all talked about it, and I love Arts Makes You Smart, because it does. It's absolutely true. Another really, really exciting thing that we've been able to do that kind of went away during the pandemic because we couldn't go, children couldn't ride buses to hear a concert, is the 5th grade school day enrichment concerts. I also grew up coming to 5th grade school day enrichment concerts here in Polk County, along with the 4th grade field trip to the museum. And so I'm proud to say that this past year, we had close to 9,000 5th graders. Almost every single school in the county was bused to Branscombe Auditorium to hear a live symphonic music program that was created especially for them. That is thank you to a partnership and collaboration we have with Polk County Public Schools Department of Fine Arts. We are supported by the superintendent who said, yes, I will get the buses. We will make it happen. And if you could see those children when they show up, first of all, logistically, to unload 4,000 children for 2 concerts over the course of 2.5 hours is a feat unto itself. But to see those kids dressed up to the nines, experiencing a concert hall for the first time, and then when those musicians come out and play that first note, and you watch those kids experience that, and you hear them when they leave, and they say things to the musicians like, that was amazing, your parents must be so proud of you. Or that was the best field trip I've ever had in my entire life. That is what it's about, folks. That is what we're doing. And so it is our priority to continue to grow our educational program, to see a youth symphony come back to Polk County, to see more and more 5th graders coming to our concerts to experiencing that, and to see students continue to come on a free ticket to experience a Masterworks for the first time or to enjoy a Pops concert. One of the other things I'll say about attracting younger audiences, a lot of that has to do with programming, right? And our theory is once we get you in, you're not ever going to leave, but we got to get you in. And so we've got to provide some programming that feels accessible to you as someone who maybe has never experienced classical music. And there are barriers that come with the label classical music right out the gate since the day that classical music was invented. And so these are still things that we encounter today, and we want to break down those barriers. But programming is huge, and we have identified some new programming, innovative ways to bring programming this season that will entice young people to come to us. We're very excited about our last concert of the season. We'll be bringing in some musicians from Broadway to perform Defying Gravity, Bewitching Broadway. And yes, we are riding the wicked wave. So we're really excited to bring folks in to not only hear the talents of those vocalists and to hear music that they're familiar with and they know and love, but to be enamored with that live symphonic music experience and want to tell their friends and continue to come back and grow into the arts lovers that we want them to be.
Super. Thank you so much. Great stuff. Great stuff there. All right, I'm going to ask one more question of the panel, and we'll answer that, and then we'll have some question and maybe answers. How about that? We'll definitely have questions. We hopefully have some answers. So we started off by talking what we're doing well, and we bantered around some different things. So this is kind of that kind of culminating answer with our question, which is, what is maybe one thing that you would like to see in the arts and cultural community, and it can be anything, that you think, specifically kind of in the Lakeland area, that you think would make for a better arts and cultural experience for our citizens and our visitors? Okay, one thing. So Tiffany first.
I feel like you keep picking on me, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. No, I would say an understanding, and not just by the arts community, because I think the arts community knows this already, but by the community at large, how important the arts are for our mental, our physical, and our community health. It sounds simple, but so often, we prioritize things that, and it's hard to choose what to prioritize, right? But we prioritize things that aren't necessarily the best, and we deprioritize. I mean, arts funding, this is something that we always discuss about. See, I said I use my one time with funding, I think. Shh.
Nobody's counting.
This is not a new issue. We're constantly fighting for arts and education. We're constantly fighting for arts and communities. And if we could unlock the understanding, and if people could understand the research, and that's one of the reasons I love the Your Brain on Art book, is because it really covers the research in such an accessible way. If we could understand it, physicians could understand it better, if teachers could understand it better, if policymakers could understand it better, then the other things would follow. The other things would just kind of fall into place.
And I agree with that 100%. But I think sometimes when you start throwing out, and I think you know this, Tiffany, because it's your world, but when you start throwing out things like research and statistics and so forth, some people's brains just kind of just shrivel. And so I would add to that, because I don't think that's wrong. I would add to that, I wish we would all remember how art makes us feel.
That inherent understanding, right?
Right, feel that there's this, I've said a bunch of times, this is a very personal thing I'm about to say. In my personal and professional life, I personally have seen three things save people: art, religion, and education. And so, when I was blessed to work at a school that had two of those. So there's power in that regardless of research, you know what I mean? I mean, it's important to have it, but that art makes us feel a way that we don't feel when it's not there. Whether it's a movie or a symphony or visual art, that sort of thing.
And I would say, how many of you are either arts appreciators or art creators or creatives?
Come on, everybody's gonna raise their hand. This is
know,
preaching
right?
to the choir in here tonight.
So, if you can, in your mind, kind of close your eyes for just a moment, and after the pandemic, visualize the first interactive arts experience that you had. I know for me it was seeing Renee Fleming, and I was in tears. I think at that time particularly, we really can reconnect with that inner part of us that knows inherently that art is part of being human. And the arts are part of being human. So that's what I would change, is just that remembrance, that connection, that understanding. It doesn't have to be statistics. It doesn't have to be that data, although I do love I love a good spreadsheet. But, it just inherently knowing that it's as important as sleep, nutrition, and exercise.
Right, and to your point we talked about earlier, that it's not a luxury, it's really a part of who we are as humans. Good point. Gillian, what was one thing you would want to see more of, better, different?
I'm so glad you asked. As a working artist, the one thing that when I came back from University of Florida, I graduated and I was like, okay, how can I show my art in Lakeland? And my transition into murals was pretty quick because that is how you can make your art accessible to people. So that makes me think that I'm one of many people that murals are the most accessible visually by like beautifying the city. So I think that Lakeland has the capacity, as the growing city that it is, to host something that could be similar to like my hopes and dreams would be something similar to Shine Fest, or something that could be a potential like mural festival that, number one, engages the youth. We could have potentially like young students come and engage, because one thing that I was missing when I'm homegrown, I went to Rochelle, I went to Harrison, I went to Lakeland. I didn't know that it was possible as a young person that was from Polk County to be a working artist and sustain yourself fully and have savings, okay, which is great. So basically, you know, contradicting the starving artist motif. But I think that Lakeland now has the capacity to host and hold a mural festival that could potentially engage all of those topics of, okay, we're doing economic development, the price of not price of real estate, but your return on investment goes significantly up when you have tons of public art, and like the youth feels engaged. They feel like, oh, it's possible for me because it's right in front of me. So
And there's the accessibility because
yes,
of that. Yeah.
accessibility as well. So I think that is something that
So
could be
a mural festival. Okay.
on
cool.
horizon.
We should have conversations later about that. So, Ashley, what do you see as one thing that you would like to see better, more, different?
Yeah, I think it's probably a larger answer than what you're wanting, but in 3 simple words, the arts cornerstone. I think oftentimes in our state, when you think of what is the pinnacle of art in our state, I think places come to mind. I think of the Ringling, I think of the Dolly, but you don't think of a city. My ultimate dream, I think I'm in a safe space of fellow art advocates, so I feel like I can speak this into existence, is I would love Lakeland to become that arts cornerstone of our state. I would love to build a culture and a district around Palmetto. I have envisioned where Palmetto turns into a transformative space of having galleries and artists in residence and a mixed-use space and between residential and commercial, and it just would be such a wonderful place to bring people to Lakeland, 1, for our economy, 2, to build this arts culture, which I think is very wanted and needed. And I also think of how we could expand. We have a wonderful museum, we have a wonderful symphony, we have wonderful programs all around, but I mean, could you think if we had a Lakeland film festival, Lakeland Fashion Week? I mean, the possibilities are endless, and I would love for in our state, for Lakeland to be synonymous with art. I think that the need and the want is there, but it has to be built. Rome is not built in a day. I think that this is in its infancy, but as the young, cool people say, I'm going to manifest it, and that's where I would love to see. So
Great
the arts
point.
cornerstone.
Wonderful. Awesome. Yes. The arts corridor. Ashley.
Well, since we're manifesting.
All right. I want a concert hall.
Well, Daryl, funny you should say. Ashley is right. This district here is full of the arts. We're in the middle of it. We're in the core of it. It's the obvious centralized place to build and grow that vision and manifestation. I live and breathe the Lakeland Symphony Orchestra and care deeply for our musicians and our mission. And one of the items that I would love to see is a concert hall. Venues are a conversation that we have as an organization a lot. And we are absolutely indebted to Florida Southern College for the partnership we have with them and the use of Branscombe Auditorium. We were able to move our entire season to Branscombe Auditorium 2 years ago instead of jumping from venue to venue. They have been a collaborative partner from the get-go. The acoustics are amazing, and we're so, so grateful. A lot of people want into Branscombe, and so there's a need for something like this in our community. And I think a centralized location, whether it's a concert hall, an arts district, a place where everyone can come and collaborate, from Tiffany to platform art to Gillian to dance and visual arts, all in one space. I think that's where things are going to really incubate and grow into whatever the next level of arts in our community look like. And it's going to take support from people like you who know the importance of creating something like that so that the arts can remain sustainable.
Super. Thank you. So since I'm moderating, I have 2 things that I get to say. First thing is going to kind of jump off or echo what Gillian said earlier. I would like to see a dedicated space, and I'm concentrating here on Lakeland. I'd like to see a dedicated space for local artists to display their work, because we don't have that. We have some public-private sort of things, right? We have, Mitchell's is wonderful. That's a private place that there's great art in there. The RP funding, I know Cindy's here, they do great in supporting the Lakeland Arts Association. But here's what while those things are so important, here's how I say, but you don't go to the RP Funding Center to buy art. You don't go to Mitchell's to buy art. That's not why you do it. It's great that it's there, but that's not why we need a gallery. And Bartow has a gallery. Winter Haven has a gallery. Frostproof has a gallery. I'm going to stop there. So I think we need that. And then from the Polk Arts and Culture Alliance perspective, kind of tied back into what we talked about had a long conversation about funding. I really am trying to work hard to create a sustainable funding model that is locally specific, i.e. it's not tied to any federal or state grants, so that local artists and arts and cultural organizations can be supported locally if something happens to grants like did last year. So I'm really working hard to try and figure out how we can do that, whether it's working with GiveWell, different things of that nature to support our local artists and our arts and cultural organizations. Now, we're fortunate we do have access to things, if hopefully things will go okay and the TDC funding will remain, but the TDC gives out over $1 million a year to arts and cultural organizations to market their events. So that's important funding. My organization, we were fortunate because of our Hall of Fame gala that made so much money, which was not its purpose. Its purpose is to honor local artists and arts and cultural organizations. But it was such a great fundraiser that we were able to take that money, turn it right back into grants specific for Polk County arts and cultural and organizations and artists. But to try and get a truly sustainable funding model for our artists that again isn't dependent on the whims of either the quote economy or the political winds of the particular day. That's something that I would love to see. I have other things, but that will require an adult beverage later if you really want to talk about that. So questions, right? Go.
Thank you so much, Daryl. Now we want to turn it over to everybody else's questions, take you off the hot seat for a minute, Daryl. I also want to point out really quickly, guys, that what you've been seeing on the slideshow afterwards, these were some of the results from a survey that we sent out. And that survey information is going to help, it will help to inform Lakeland's vision, and can also help inform conversations like these. So that's the QR code, is to take that survey, so please participate in that. So now, who has questions? All right, Andy.
Thank you for holding this. This is wonderful, because more people need to know that we've got arts in this community. But how can you use your considerable influence to get more art classes in the public schools?
Well, so thank you for asking that. Hold on. I think it's really important. Remember I talked about perspective. I think it's really important to understand what is happening and what is not happening, right? The Polk County Public Schools is, and I have considerable knowledge of what goes on locally and I mean around our state and so forth. Polk County Public Schools does a tremendous job supporting arts education in the schools. They really do. And let me give you some perspective. I was an administrator in 2008, the recession. Districts were gutting their art programs, eliminating them. Polk County School Board, totally different administration than we have now. Polk County School Board put a stake in the sand and said, we will not cut arts, and they did not. Even now, they are committed to arts in all of our schools. There's a district very close to us that just eliminated all arts access for students up through 3rd grade. Right? Perspectives, all I'm saying. I know a district south of here where there are schools that have no art in them. None. Elementary schools. Now, I am probably Polk County Public Schools' biggest fan. I went through Polk County Public Schools. I sent my children through Polk County Public Schools. I taught in Polk County Public Schools. I'm also one of their biggest critics, because we can be better. And I've had conversations with people about that. And so, to your point, Andy, I think there are things that can be done. I will tell you, I am confident in Superintendent Hyde and I know for a fact he has told people, we will not cut art programs. Those words have come out of his mouth. I know for a fact that Beth Cummings, the Senior Director of Fine Arts, is passionate about making sure everybody has access to the arts. So when you say, how can we get more art in there, you would almost have to change the curriculum at the state level. And what I mean by that is, the state of Florida says you will do A through Z in a school day. You will go to PE. You will take this class, you will take that class. And some of that curricular constriction is what has allowed districts to eliminate arts. Because they say, and they're not necessarily wrong, they say, we've got to offer these types of things. And so part of my response, and this is not the answer you want to hear, but my response, again, if you and I were having this conversation on the sidewalk, watch how you vote.
Yeah, and there's so much red tape in the government sector. I think it doesn't solve the problem necessarily, but I think it really drives home how important it is to support private organizations, nonprofits who are providing these services to our youth. Because, you know, as these budget cuts keep happening, as these curriculum changes are happening, you know, the other way that we can reach out to our youth right now is through those different programming models to these organizations. And so it's even more important that they receive the support, they receive the funding. And I know we've said money tonight, but money does make the world go round. I mean, how many that's another cookie concert for our youth. That's another, you know, program that they get to, you know, do these things. And so it just really drives home how important it is to support our local organizations as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point, you know, because we all can kind of get tunnel vision when we think arts education, we think in the public school sector, but there are tons of nonprofits and other organizations that are doing arts education that help to supplement that, so.
And I would say too, I would challenge just watching how you vote, but I mean, really getting involved, giving of your time and of your money and of, you know, of your thoughts. And I would say when you do get involved, come to the table not just with the problems, don't just be the loudest voice in the room, but be the loudest voice in the room that is there to help solve the problem. And come with solutions too.
And your checkbook.
And your checkbook.
Okay, another question. All right, actually, I'm gonna ask if you have a question, could you maybe come over here? We had to add seating, and so it's gotten a little jumbled and a little harder to actually explain.
That's amazing. I just have to commend our community. Wow. To come out here.
I know, Tiffany, you said
That's
something
amazing.
earlier about the same people always showing up, and I think.
I shouldn't have said that. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, everyone here. I love it. I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to say that you guys did a phenomenal job at answering some of the questions that I had personally coming here today. So I'm an artist, just like Gillian is, and I moved to Lakeland about 2 years ago, and in my profession that I've been doing for roughly 20 years, I've had the opportunity to experience how different cities have actually formulated and have grown extensively through the use of public art, and so for example, like I was in Wynwood when it was first, growing and starting. I was in Richmond, Virginia when it was first going and starting. I was in Boston when it was first going and starting. LA, et cetera, New York.
So you're saying you're a lucky penny, is that what you're saying?
Maybe I'm a lucky penny, but I've seen what art can do for communities, especially public art, all art, obviously, music included, but I feel like, my critique of Lakeland is that I feel like there's a disconnection between some of these areas, like, oh, there's Dixieland, oh, there's, this over here, oh, there's this over here, and I feel like, this is such Lakeland is such a wide canvas to be able to do something fascinating. So I do agree with Ms. Ashley here that it is, there's so much potential in this city to do something spectacular. And that goes without saying, especially in all disciplines, by the way, not just visual arts, but in theater, in music, in dance, et cetera, et cetera. And obviously Harrison will definitely play a major role in that as a hub of making good artists, right, for the future. I also went to New World School of the Arts in Miami, so I'm very much aware with what the magnet programs and those kinds of things can do for our young artists. So I guess my question is, do you guys think that Lakeland has the potential to become something like Wynwood, for example? Not to charge to see public art, etc., but to be something that is more for the people, right? Because I mean, Wynwood has become more of a business at this point, but I do think, yeah, I mean, could Lakeland become that destination that I think a lot of these people want to see, and especially, could there be an arts district made here that could actually help artists like the ones that are here flourish locally? Like when I show my work, I have to go to New York, I have to go to Paris, I have to go to China. But I would like to do those things here where my family is, right? I'm new to Lakeland. We fell in love with Lakeland when me and my wife moved here. And we do see that there's so much potential, and we'd love to know if there's any plans or is anybody thinking of something that could potentially enhance everything.
Yeah, I think the key is the alignment and commitment to a shared vision. I think what you brought up is like Lakeland is a very, a very wide casted net. You have public, private, you have county, city. There's a lot of entities that go into it, but I think it starts with the core of, does this community share that same vision? And I hope so. I mean, I shared my pipe dream tonight. I really hope that we have an arts district. But I think it starts with conversations like this. You don't know until you voice this, and you have people rally behind you, and you speak about it. So I think starting with tonight with forums like this is like integral to anyone who wants to sort of bring that into existence. So I really commend you, and thank you for being part of our community.
And I would say too, sorry. So I would also say part of the Polk Arts and Health Collaborative is one of the goals is to break down silos between different sectors that help make arts engagement and collaboration more possible. So one of the things that we're doing initially is really mapping what exists in the realms of arts and health, and then also looking at how do we, if an organization wants to bring more health programming to their arts or more arts to their health. So that, again, I'm just going to plug it again, but polkartsandhealth.org has that community asset map. So if you know of organizations that are doing that, that's going to help us to kind of break down some of those silos so we can have more conversations together collaboratively.
And I was going to say, in the survey and some of the comments that you saw, that was a recurring theme, the desire for kind of an arts district, for more physical spaces here for people to show their arts and display local art.
I need to turn around and read this.
I don't even know why we were here.
I'll send it to you.
I do feel like we are on the verge of something really great. I get that feeling when we are meeting together, when we are talking together with other creatives, but also with just community members. I feel like we're on the verge of something beautiful. I mean, this space was part of that. I think that next step.
I think we've got time for at least one more question. There's one more inquisitive person. Oh, here we go. Right. Hi there. First of all, thank you so much. These panelists and these questions have been so fantastic. I am living for this discussion. This is literally, I'm like in my happy place right now. I just wanted to ask, as an artist, as someone who also sees the potential and wants to be a part of that growth, as that is building up, as it's growing, what is your encouragement and advice for us artists now on what we can do to be getting this word out, getting our art into spaces, as a lot of us truthfully are struggling? I have plenty of friends of mine who we want to have art spaces and gallery meetings, but we can't afford the spaces. We want to have a studio space where our homes just don't allow that. What is your encouragement for us artists who, as we anticipate galleries, as we anticipate the art markets, what can we be doing more of? That way we can start help building, but also not suffering anymore.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what's the most pressing need, do you think? Do you think it's more so the studio space to create, or is it more the opportunities to display and interact?
Ooh, that's a great question. Ooh, that's so
I know
hard.
both are important, but that's just a genuine question I have from your perspective.
Yeah, that's really, honestly, having the space is fantastic and awesome, but if you have nowhere to show it, what are we doing it for? If we don't have a way to get it in front of people, having the space kind of starts to feel a little like, all right, now I've got a lot of good stuff I like, but where am I going with it? So
probably having more opportunities to get it in front of people and building that art community and being able to make a living as an artist.
I have that same problem. Like, immediately I'm like, what do I do with all these gigantic canvases in my tiny, tiny apartment? And that is, and I know you personally, like, so you have gone into the sector of murals, and that is the quickest, like, answer to, okay, how do I get my art out? And, like, it is the most, like, Polk County friendly way to be like, okay, I am providing a service, basically. So it is kind of shifting a mindset as like a working artist to like a service provider, where you're like, I am feeding my soul because I get to create still, but I am also feeding myself literally because I'm doing murals and work for hire, basically. But my like best thing that I could advise, and I have talked to you already, so to anybody, is to basically like knock on doors and be like, I want to create this for you. And like, I never say design anything for free, but portfolio display and stuff, and like approaching businesses and doing cold emails and stuff for opportunities to, like, don't wait for them to present themselves, because everything's, you know, oh, it could be amazing, it could be someday in the works and something, but I really, like, you better, you know, take the bull by the horns if you want to make sure that your art gets seen and felt and all of your hard work gets, you know, rewarded. So take the bull by the horns.
I actually have a follow-up question to this, if you will. And it's like, Daryl, you said earlier, you mentioned that, you know, every artist is themselves an entrepreneur and a business owner. And I think that's part of what's embedded in those questions. And so I'm wondering, what resources are there out there for artists to train up as business owners? Because, and sorry, one second longer, we've seen some failures of some important organizations here. And I think that those failures, you know, like you mentioned, is the theater that was, you know, too specific, too niche. Some of those failures were failures in the business plan itself.
Right. Well, you know, and it's a great question, and it's also a wicked problem, right? You know, the wicked problems are you push one part of the problem and it pops up over here. Because before, I'm going to put that on hold for a second. I want to talk to the young lady about the artist thing, and the gentleman, I don't know where he is, that asked the question too, yeah. So I run the Polk Arts and Culture Alliance. One of the things we did was a strategic plan, and one of the surveys stuff came back and said, we would just like to have opportunities for artists to get together. And I said, okay, I can facilitate that. Now I will tell you, and this is not meant to be critical at all, some people who know me know what I'm going to say. I've done that before, and 2 people have shown up. So, and what I would also say, you know, you brought up the Wynwood and the things like that. I want to, in the artist kind of things, those great arts communities did not start with organizations or businesses, or for that matter, really even governmental incursion. That doesn't mean they weren't supported. They started with artists, right? And so we need to figure out a way that we get that kind of collective, you know, mass, so to speak, momentum together, and then see where we can go with that. And I will tell you, because that was something that was in our strategic plan, we're going to have some artist meetups, and it's for all artists. It's for musicians, it's for theater artists, it's for visual artists, and you know they're going to be informal at first. But I think kind of to where we're going with this, and what Gillian was saying, is making these connections. I believe that's the first step, as opposed to, you know, a government entity saying, hey, here's this building for a space. That's all well and good, but then it gets to kind of your question, Trinity, is okay, how do you manage that? And I would 100% agree with you. Some of the failures we've seen in the last couple of years, I'm looking at my friend Scott Audette, because we have these private conversations all the time. Some of those, almost all of those actually, have been business plan failures. And part of their business plan failures, and because if we're going to talk business, that's not as sexy as being an artist, but if we're going to talk business, there are a lot of you smarter in business than me, but I know that the number one thing about business is understanding your audience. And some of those failures in the art realm were not understanding their audience. And so it's the old cliche about what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. You know, and Gillian has hammered that point home tonight, which is just talking about taking advantage of the audience here in Polk County, which is mural friendly. It beautifies. It's such a win-win-win, right? Now, she's not suggesting every artist can be a muralist, but she's shown a pathway, right? She's shown a pathway to that, and I think that she's a perfect example of understanding her audience. And we've had other organizations, some of them were around a long time and just didn't really quite understand the audience. As we said earlier today evening, how the audience has shifted in that sort of thing. But to your question about resources, there really aren't a lot of specific arts business resources. I'm trying to look at, I see Tyson from Southeastern out there. I don't know if I get anybody from, Don, Polk State. And I want to put them on the spot because they may not be doing it. That's why I don't want to put them on the spot. But are the college art programs teaching artists how to be business people? And the answer, don't answer, is probably no. Because typically, I'm looking at Leslie who has a degree, typically it's a performing type thing. So there is a lack from a formal education standpoint in a general sense. It may be happening sometime. I do know there are third-party organizations locally that support small businesses. They're not really art specific, but they do talk a little bit about how to make connections and how to build, even building websites and things of that nature. Some of the worst websites I've ever seen are by arts and cultural organizations. They're awful. And I tell them that every time I see them. And you would think that's not the case. But it's not because they don't understand art or principles of design. It's because understanding how to build a website is very different than that. And so making sure those skills are out there in these different organizations that can do that. And there are a few of those. I'd be happy to talk if there's people want some specifics on that. There's an expo that happens, a Central Florida Business Expo. They have a nonprofit sector, and they also have a small business sector. Now, there's not art-specific things there. That's where it gets a little sticky. But there's ways to learn about being a better business person. Tyson, I see you back there. No, he's not questioning, he's commenting.
Tyson White, I'm at Southeastern University. We do teach the students, at least in the School of Music, some of the business practices, but something that might be more helpful to anyone else who's looking for this is the Lift Alliance, which is sponsoring professional development of nonprofits. And so we hosted them this year at Southeastern University, but they're not exclusive to Southeastern University. We were just hosting them. But I would encourage you to check out the Lift Alliance if that's something that interests you, because it educates and assists nonprofits with developing and with their business plans and things like that.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, let me say, I think that's it for the questions for now. So thank you so much. Can we get a huge round of applause for our and for our wonderful moderator, Daryl Ward. And I want to give you guys, can you have a round of applause for you for showing up tonight, coming out? If I can for one moment, I want to say that I was recently in the Ulster Museum in Belfast, and I was exposed to an artist I'd never heard of, Joseph Beuys. I'm not sure I'm saying his last name right. German artist from the 20th century. But he was famous for saying that everybody is an artist, and for this idea of social sculpture. And the idea behind social sculpture is that our cities, our communities, all of it is a piece of artwork that we create collectively. So I just want to thank you all for coming out tonight and collectively creating this piece of work, this piece of art that is Lakeland. So thank you. I think there's still some snacks in the lobby.